Dear viewers, this is the beginning of part 2 in the 4-part series on organization of the human body. Cell functions. Each tissue or organ is an aggregate of many different cells held together by intercellular supporting structures. Each type of cell is specially adapted to perform one or a few particular functions. For example, the red blood cells, numbering about 25 trillion in each person, transport oxygen from the lungs to the tissues. Although the red blood cells are the most abundant of any single type of cell in the body, there are also trillions of additional cells of other types that perform functions different from those of the red blood cell. The entire body contains about 35 to 40 trillion human cells. The many cells of the body often differ markedly from one another, but all have certain basic characteristics that are alike. For example, oxygen reacts with carbohydrate, fat, and protein to release the energy required for all cells to function. Furthermore, the general chemical mechanisms for changing nutrients into energy are basically the same in all cells, and all cells deliver products of their chemical reactions into the surrounding fluids. Almost all cells also have the ability to reproduce additional cells of their own type. Fortunately, when cells of a particular type are destroyed, the remaining cells of this type usually generate new cells until the supply is replenished. Microorganisms living in the body outnumber human cells. In addition to human cells, trillions of microbes inhabit the body, living on the skin and in the mouth, gut, and nose. The gastrointestinal tract, for example, normally contains a complex and dynamic population of 400 to 1000 species of microorganisms that outnumber our human cells. Communities of microorganisms that inhabit the body, often called microbiota, can cause disease, but most of the time they live in harmony with their human hosts and provide vital functions that are essential for survival of their hosts. Although the importance of gut microbiota in the digestion of foodstuffs is widely recognized, additional roles for the body's microbes in nutrition, immunity, and other functions are just beginning to be appreciated and represent an intense area of biomedical research. Dear listeners, by the way, this educational video is made possible by Prescribon, the makers of e-prescription software for digital prescriptions, available freely for doctors on the website www.prescribon.com. Doctors who are interested in this e-prescription can freely avail of its vast collection of more than 100,000 e-prescriptions. Now coming back to the discussion, extracellular fluid, the internal environment. The surface of the cell is defined by a membrane. The chemical composition of the cell interior is very different from that of its surroundings. This appreciation applies equally to unicellular organisms that swim freely in a freshwater pond and to neurons that are densely packed in the cerebral cortex of the human brain. The biochemical processes involved in cell function require the maintenance of a precisely regulated intracellular environment. The cytoplasm is an extraordinarily complex solution, the constituents of which include myriad proteins, nucleic acids, nucleotides, and sugars that the cell synthesizes or accumulates at great metabolic cost. Note, nucleic acids are large biomolecules that play essential roles in all cells and viruses. A major function of nucleic acids involve the storage and expression of genomic information. Deoxyribonucleic acid or DNA encodes the information cells need to make proteins. Nucleotide. A nucleotide is one of the structural components or building blocks of DNA and RNA. A nucleotide consists of a base, one of four chemicals: adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine, plus a molecule of sugar and one of phosphoric acid. The four most common forms of simple sugars include glucose, this the body uses for its metabolism; fructose, also known as fruit sugar; sucrose is known as table sugar or simply sugar; lactose, also known as dairy sugar. The cell also expends tremendous energy to regulate the intracellular concentrations of numerous ions. If there were no barrier surrounding the cell to prevent exchange between the intracellular and extracellular spaces, all of the cytoplasm's hard-won compositional uniqueness would be lost by diffusion in a few seconds. The requisite barrier is provided by the plasma membrane, which forms the cell's outer skin. Characters of plasma membrane. The plasma membrane is impermeable to large molecules, such as proteins and nucleic acids, thus ensuring their retention within the cytosol. It is selectively permeable to small molecules, such as ions and metabolites. However, the metabolic requirements of the cell demand a plasma membrane that is much more sophisticated than a simple passive barrier that allows various substances to leak through at different rates. Frequently, the concentration of a nutrient in the extracellular fluid, ECF, is very much lower than that required inside the cell. Composition of extracellular fluid. All values in milliequivalents per liter. Note: sodium and potassium are nearly opposite, reflecting the activity of cellular ATP, that is adenosine triphosphate dependent sodium potassium pumps. Sodium 142, potassium 4.2, calcium 1.2, chloride 106, bicarbonate 24, phosphate 2. Note: sodium is the major cation, chloride is the major anion. Composition of intracellular fluid. Sodium 12, potassium 140, calcium 1 into 10 power minus 7, chloride 3, bicarbonate 10, phosphate 107. Note: low sodium and chloride values. Potassium is the chief cation. Phosphate is the chief anion. If the cell wishes to use a substance at a higher concentration within the cell than that in the extracellular fluid, it must be able to accumulate it against a concentration gradient from a low concentration in interstitial fluid to a higher concentration in intracellular fluid. A simple pore in the membrane cannot concentrate anything. It can only modulate the rate at which a gradient dissipates. To accomplish the more sophisticated feat of creating a concentration gradient, the membrane must be endowed with special machinery that uses metabolic energy to drive the uphill movements of substances, that is, active transport, into or out of the cell. In addition, it would be useful to rapidly modulate the permeability properties of the plasma membrane in response to various metabolic stimuli. Active transport and the ability to control passive permeabilities underlie a wide range of physiological processes, from the electrical excitability of neurons to the resorptive, that is reabsorption, and secretory functions of the kidney. About 50 to 70% of the adult human body is fluid, mainly a water solution of ions and other substances. Although most of this fluid is inside the cells and is called intracellular fluid, about one third is in the spaces outside the cells and is called extracellular fluid. This extracellular fluid is in constant motion throughout the body. It is transported rapidly in the circulating blood and then mixed between the blood and tissue fluids by diffusion through the capillary walls. In the extracellular fluid are the ions and nutrients needed by the cells to maintain life. Thus, all cells live in essentially the same environment, the extracellular fluid. For this reason, the extracellular fluid is also called the internal environment of the body or the milieu interior, a term introduced by the great 19th century French physiologist Claude Bernard, born in 1813 and died in 1878. Cells are capable of living and performing their special functions as long as the proper concentrations of oxygen, glucose, different ions, amino acids, fatty substances, and other constituents are available in this internal environment. Differences in extracellular and intracellular fluids. The extracellular fluid contains large amounts of sodium, chloride, and bicarbonate ions, plus nutrients for the cells such as oxygen, glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids. It also contains carbon dioxide that is being transported from the cells to the lungs to be excreted, plus other cellular waste products that are being transported to the kidneys for excretion. The intracellular fluid contains large amounts of potassium, magnesium, and phosphate ions instead of the sodium and chloride ions found in the extracellular fluid. Special mechanisms for transporting ions through the cell membranes maintain the ion concentration differences between the extracellular and intracellular fluids. Homeostasis, that is, maintenance of a nearly constant internal environment. Homeostasis is a term to describe the maintenance of nearly constant conditions in the internal environment. Essentially, all organs and tissues of the body perform functions that help maintain these relatively constant conditions. For example, the lungs provide oxygen to the extracellular fluid to replenish the oxygen used by the cells. The kidneys maintain constant ion concentrations. The gastrointestinal system provides nutrients while eliminating waste from the body. The various ions, nutrients, waste products, and other constituents of the body are normally regulated within a range of values rather than at fixed values. Powerful control systems exist for maintaining concentrations of sodium and hydrogen ions, as well as for most of the other ions, nutrients, and substances in the body at levels that permit the cells, tissues, and organs to perform their normal functions despite wide environmental variations and challenges from injury and diseases. Normal body functions require integrated actions of cells, tissues, organs, and multiple nervous, hormonal, and local control systems that together contribute to homeostasis and good health. Homeostatic compensations in disease. Disease is often considered to be a state of disrupted homeostasis. However, even in the presence of disease, homeostatic mechanisms continue to operate and maintain vital functions through multiple compensations. In some cases, these compensations may lead to major deviations of the body functions from the normal range, making it difficult to distinguish the primary cause of the disease from the compensatory response. For example, diseases that impair the kidney's ability to excrete salt and water may lead to high blood pressure, which initially helps return excretion to normal so that a balance between intake and renal excretion can be maintained. This balance is needed to maintain life, but over long periods of time, the high blood pressure can damage various organs, including the kidneys, causing even greater increase in blood pressure and more renal damage. Thus, homeostatic compensations that ensue after injury, disease, or major environmental challenges to the body may represent trade-offs that are necessary to maintain vital body functions, but in the long term contribute to additional abnormalities of body function. The discipline of pathophysiology seeks to explain how the various physiological processes are altered in diseases or injury. So, dear viewers, this video is the end of part 2 in the 4-part series on the organization of the human body in the Medicine for Common Man series. Dear readers, thank you for watching.